Well, the Manitoba Craft Council's latest exhibit creates common ground amongst the artists that created it. It's Familiar combines the works of 5 unique artists who each met together over the course of a number of weeks to grapple with what it means to make a life in a place where so much is unfamiliar. It's Familiar was curated by Alireza Bayat, who joins us here on Classic 107. Hello.
Hi, Nolan.
Thanks so much for taking the time. First of all, maybe you can take me back to the moment
Sure.
that you were inspired to create this space for artists to explore what it means to create and to live in a place that's consistently maybe unfamiliar.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for your very, very good introduction. So, it first started by my personal interest in research, I think, throughout the methodologies of participatory design. For a specific course that I was taking back in the day in 2022, it all started there searching for ways through which, we can break down the power of, let's say, the authority of curator, the very classical notion of curator as someone who is in charge of the exhibition, comes up with the idea, starting with the idea in the square one and ending with install and deinstall an exhibition. So yeah, that was where I started, like with this interest of, let's say, democratizing the role of curator. Yeah, and then of course we had this great chance of working with Manitoba Crafts Council and the Winnipeg Foundation, which led to this exhibition.
So I love this idea of democratizing the role of the curator. And at the same time, this is a selection of artists that you, I'm assuming, curated to some degree for being a part of this exhibit.
So true.
How did you go about that process of deciding who is going to be a part of your exhibit democracy, if you can call it that?
Yeah, I mean that's a good way of putting it. So yeah, that's and I don't want to say an internal, let's say, contradiction, but at the same time, even the most democratized systems gonna have some sort of, let's say, constitution for themselves, right? A guideline by which they can, take every single step. So our only way was to make it as wide as we can. So we had an open call, right? Everyone was free to just respond to the open call, and then obviously because of the restrictions of a single exhibition you're making, you have to come down and narrow down your list of chosen artists to 4 or 5, based on limitations of resources and space. But the artists were all chosen, based on the mandate that um, we, curator and Manitoba Crafts Council, created and came up to provide a better platform, if you like, for the artists who are not usually very familiar in our community, let's say in our Winnipeg art scene.
Hmm. So maybe then that can lead us briefly into a bit of a description of the artists who make up It's Familiar and maybe what they each brought to the exhibit as they explored this question of making a life in this somewhat unfamiliar place.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, as you may imagine, during this process of participatory curating, not as usual, we didn't have a theme. Like, we didn't have a curatorial theme through which artists had to create their artworks or, respond to create an artwork ultimately. So, we just started with a group of, let's say, 6 people who have been sitting together, discussing and trying to uh, know each other, but at the same time, create a common ground, create a consensus, if you like, a sphere of agreements in which we could, continue our work towards next steps. So the artists are coming from the very varied backgrounds. I mean, varied in terms of geography, culture, and this is at the same time very enriching, but also very hard to work with, right? When you want
Mm.
to agree upon a certain theme, for instance, So yeah, we had, for instance, Mayam Bobby, who's of Iranian Persian heritage, and an artist in town, Winnipeg-based artist. We had Lourdes, who's very active in organic, natural dyeing and processes that are very land-based. And we had the privilege of working with Giancarlo, who was uh, a newcomer from Peru with a very good background, in art, as an educator, as an artist. Uh, and also Des, who is not a newcomer, but also an active local artist of, let's say, Serbian heritage. We also had Netsanat, who is a recent graduate of the MA program at the School of Arts of Ethiopian Heritage, engaging with us throughout this dialect, if it answers your question.
Yeah. So a wide range of artists and a wide range of communities represented within that. From there, I understand that you gathered all these artists together for
Yes.
maybe every 6 weeks or so, or for 6 weeks, I understand, to talk about the art and to make plans for what It's Familiar would ultimately look like. What did those conversations sound like, and how did they end up shaping this final version of the show?
Perfect question. Yeah, that's all about participatory design and curating. We're bringing in a methodology which was not at first place designed for artwork, right?
Mm.
Participatory design was created in Nordic countries for, let's say, industrial design to make a more comfortable environment for laborers who are, engaging with their machines and working
Mm.
workshops and places like that to make it more, let's say, livable for the users. But we are bringing in this methodology, and although it's very, well developed, it doesn't perfectly match the visual arts, say, needs and demands. So we
Mm.
had to borrow from different fields, like these negotiations were partly based on what we call word cafe method, which, is, let's say, a form of uh, free discussions, a round table that are at the same time including a lot of elements of brainstorming. At the same time, we were borrowing a lot, let's say, from methodologies of psychodrama,
Mm.
which are also, borrowed from theater, obviously, and other disciplines. So throughout this, let's say, constant meetings at the first 6, 7 weeks, uh, we were all, building our, let's say, core activity around human communication, because living out all these seemingly different elements of where you're
Mm.
coming from, what language you speak in, and how you sound, when you speak English as a second language, all these things. When you leave all these things behind, you see that there is a very solid core of human condition and human
Mm.
communication, and that was, I think, what we reached during those first very constructive 6, 7 weeks of the exhibition. We found out that despite all those differences, we have the same worries about the future of the kids, the same worries about our planet, the, we had the same anxieties, that probably forced us to leave our source community and come to Canada. You all of a sudden find out that despite all those, let's say, differences that sit on the top of the water, when you dive deep in, there is this unified core of agreements, and this
Mm.
made, the backbone of our thing, our process of participatory making together.
We've alluded a couple of times now to the other sort of unifying theme amongst the artists of It's Familiar, not only that sort of universal common ground of humanity, those themes that you were just talking about there, but also a theme of being an other in the midst of this sort of Canadian context, coming from different places to try and find a better life in this country.
Yes.
How would you describe the experience of creating art in Canada as part of an immigrant community, or even maybe even a better question, what were those conversations like as you all sat in those rooms for those 6 weeks and discussed your shared visions, the things that bring your art in common?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you, Nolan. So, we went forward. So that human communication, let's say, section made the bedrock of the discussions, and then based on top of those, we started to get more specific, right?
Mm.
Like talking about the specific stories in relation to how you feel about your host community, in this case, Canada, and all those, strings that keep you attached to your source community, no matter how long passed since you first, moved to Canada. So there were stories about, let's say, double absence and double presence of immigrants, of people of, let's say, displaced experience. Um, this feeling that you have stories that are still very well connected with your home. You still have haunted memories of your home, and you feel very much emotionally attached to the community that accepted you and hosted you, while at the same time you struggle a lot to find yourself or to find your preferred, let's say, position in your host community. So sometimes you feel that you're not either here, you're not either there. So we talked about all this, let's say, very intimate stories. Sometimes you feel that, yeah, I belong to both these communities and maybe more than two communities, because sometimes you have, diasporic communities within your host community, which yeah, makes everything even more complicated.
Mhm.
So, and if you see, for instance, like a section of Giancarlo's artwork, uh, there he has printed, some words on canvas, and they are mounted on wall. You will find out that these are exactly the kind of words that we use during those sessions, to write down our, let's say, very spontaneous thoughts, our yeah, the keywords that we presented at that time, because we had this, table sheets made of paper that we used to write down whatever just came to our thoughts, and later we saw that those very spontaneous, showers of thought, they're actually making up, these warps and thefts of our, let's say, exhibition textile, if
Mhm.
you like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This exhibit is on display now for a number of weeks, almost till the end of October.
That's right.
What can audiences expect to see at the show, and what do you hope maybe that they take away from seeing all these different perspectives that have so much in common?
Yeah. So first of all, I hope that everyone who is able comes to the gallery and sees the artworks, in their physical form, in dialogue with one another, because uh, this is the very interesting thing about a participatory exhibition. Artworks are not brought in and installed in a specific white cube. Artworks are the result of an ongoing process, all made, independently, but at the same time
Mm.
engaged in a bigger body of dialogue. This is the beauty of, participatory exhibitions. You'll find out that these artists, after this long period of time, were not only, working on their artworks, but kind of affecting each other's art as well, because they
Mm.
were emotionally attached. They were in dialogue, making comments about each other's artwork. So when you go inside, Manitoba Crafts Council's gallery C2, you would see, how intimate, like members of a family, these artworks are sitting close to one another, while they have different techniques, different mediums, different outlooks, and you will find out that I think how very genuinely, let's say, the artists are making this connection with their own very personal, but at the same time with their Canadian Winnipeg community as well. Like, Giancarlo, for instance, is bringing in his Mayan, elements is coming from Peru, right? The indigenous culture of
Mhm.
Peru within the exhibit, while he's also borrowing from the indigenous culture of Canada as well. And then, uh, putting another layer of, his own personal understanding
Mm.
in between all this. We have this, let's say, aircraft window, sitting in the center of exhibit, like very, very clearly, displaying this, let's say, themes of displacement and immigration, while the threads are coming out of this window, connecting it to different pieces of probably hopes for future and nostalgia of the past. I really hope that the audience enjoys it as we enjoyed making it, and yeah, they leave the gallery space with a better understanding of the word of, let's say, immigrants in dialogue with the host community here in Winnipeg.
Yeah. It's Familiar runs at the Manitoba Craft Council until October the 25th. We'll have more information linked at our website, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Alireza Bayat, thank you so much for joining us here on Classic 107 to tell us more about It's Familiar.
My absolute pleasure, Nolan. Thank you very much.